Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speakers today, who is going to talk about the historical legal foundations of education. But before that, let me first give you some backgrounds and the importance of knowing these topics. First, it will help us to understand how the past events shape the present education system, theories, and related phenomena in the area of teacher education in particular and education in general. Secondly, it will enable us to appreciate the importance of education to mankind since time immemorial across the generations. By doing so, you will be able to critically examine the fundamental part which education plays in the transformation of society. So at this juncture, I will now introduce our first speaker for today. So our first speaker has had a distinguished career in education. She is a graduate of Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English and is now pursuing her master's degree. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker, Ms. Caminade. A round of applause, please. Our second guest is a graduate of law and a certified board passer. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our talented lawyer, Ms. Missy Nicole Nacario. A round of applause, please. Our third speaker is also a graduate of Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English and is also pursuing her master's degree. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Ms. Briley Antipuesto. A round of applause, please. So hello listeners, good morning. I am Caminade and I will be your first speaker for today. So I welcome you all to our discussion for today and I hope that my sharing will be helpful for you, especially for those teachers, future educators and others who are also listening with me right now. So for our first discussion is the historical foundations of the education. Now, what are these historical foundations? So these are the following. First, education in pre-literate societies. So people in pre-literate societies lived before the invention of writing. Therefore, they used an oral tradition or storytelling to pass on their culture and history from one generation to the next. So by using language, people learn to create and use symbols, words, or signs to express their ideas. When these symbols grew into pictographs and letters, human beings created a written language and made a great cultural leap to literacy. So second is education in ancient Africa and Asia. So in ancient Egypt, priests in temple schools taught not only religion but also the principles of writing, the sciences, mathematics, and architecture. And similarly in India, priests conducted most of the formal education. So Indian priests taught the principles of the Veda, which is a sacred text of Hinduism, as well as science, grammar, and philosophy. So third is education in ancient Greece. So ancient Greece is one of the origins of Western formal education. The education of women depended upon the customs of the particular Greek city-states. So in Athens, where women had no legal or economic rights, most women did not attend school. Some girls, however, were educated at home by tutors. And slaves and other non-citizens had either no formal education or very little. And in contrast to Athens, Spartan girls received more schooling, but it was almost exclusively athletic training to prepare them to be healthy mothers of future Spartan soldiers. So fourth is education in ancient Rome. So Romans are preoccupied of war and conquest. Therefore, only a minority of Romans attended school. The girls from wealthy families occasionally learned to read and write at home. Boys also attended a primary school called a ludus. And in secondary school, boys studied Latin and Greek grammar, also taught by Greek slaves, called pedagogies. So fifth is the ancient Jewish education. And most information in ancient Jewish goals and methods of education comes from the Bible and the Talmud. Talmud is a book of religious and civil law. Rabbis advised parents to teach their children religious beliefs, law, ethical practices, and vocational skills. Sixth is the medieval education. So in medieval education, Western society and education were heavily shaped by Christianity, particularly the Roman Catholic Church. So much of the teaching in these schools was directed at learning Latin. Frankish King Charlemagne was among the first medieval Europe to support formal education. And also in medieval education institutions were three types. First, grammar schools, monastic schools, and universities. Also, Western educators learned new ways of thinking about mathematics, natural science, medicine, and philosophy. So seventh is education during the Renaissance. So the Renaissance or rebirth of learning. Then during the early Renaissance period, children, it's either male and female, attended school in Florence. Women from the nobility or upper classes often had obligations that required literacy. So with the rise of higher education, households were able to employ poor university students as tutors. So 8 is education during the Protestant Reformation. So in the Protestant views of education, a major tenet of Protestantism that influenced their view on education was the idea of a personal responsibility. What this meant was that people needed to study for themselves and not just listen to the teacher. So in a spiritual sense, that meant reading the Bible for oneself. Also, they established vernacular primary schools that offered a basic curriculum of reading, writing, arithmetic, and religion for children in their own language. 9 is education during the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment principles that considered education as an instrument of social reform and improvement remain fundamental characteristics of American education policy. So they wanted the education system to be modernized and play a more central role in the transmission of those ideas and ideals. So the improvements in the educational system produced a larger reading public, which resulted in increased demand for printed materials from readers across a broader span of social classes with a wider range of interest. So 10th is education in the 19th century. The foundations of modern education were established in the 19th century. During most of the 19th century, the primary education was provided mainly by the church and mainly for the children of poor parishioners. It was not earlier than in the 1860s that the government started to participate in the development of the education sphere. And also Pestalozzi developed a so-called object lesson that involved exercises and learning form, number, and language. So after that historical foundation, let's move on to the law. So what is law? Law is a social science and that involves and develops with the growth and development of society. It is a rule of personal conduct enforced by institutions called courts. So new developments in society create new problems and the law is required to deal with these issues. Now, where are these laws came from? So the main sources of the Philippine law are the following: the Constitution, statutes, treaties, and conventions, judicial conventions. So what are the 8 types of law? First is criminal law, which concerns itself with finding and punishing people who have broken the law by committing crimes. Second is a corporate law. Corporate law is a system of critical justice that makes sure businesses adhere to local and federal regulations for conducting business legally. Third, international law, which governs the interactions between different countries. These laws are designed to promote trade and to keep all citizens safe. Fourth is commercial law, which is sometimes called trade law or business law, which deals with commerce, trade, and consumer transactions. These broad legal field includes areas like bankruptcy, contracts, mortgages, and real estate, consumer credit, and banking. Fifth is a family law. Family law handles cases related to family relationships such as divorce and child custody, adoption, and termination of parental rights. So sixth is a constitutional law includes any legal proceedings related to upholding or interpreting the Philippine Constitution. And seven is a labor law, which oversees the relationship between employers and employees. So their goal is to ensure that employees aren't taken advantage of by the corporations, which typically have more bargaining power or resources than an individual employee. And we have eight is intellectual property law, which refers to intangible creative works or inventions that are protected by copyrights, trademarks, or patents. So now, do you guys know what are the sources of the educational jurisprudence? If no, then listen very carefully. First, let's discuss one of the sources of the education system, which is the Constitution. So the 1987 Philippine Constitution, in the Article 14, Education, Science and Technology, Arts, Culture and Sports, Section 1 to Section 18 tackles about the protection and promotion of the right of all the citizens to have the quality, free public education to all levels and take appropriate steps to making sure that the education is protected and also well established. So, let's move on to the second sources of the Philippine education system, which is a statute. So, in the Batas Pambansa 232, or otherwise known as the Education Act of 1982, was signed into law by President Ferdinand E. Marcos. So, Section 10, 11, and 16 of this law are helpful in understanding the rights and duties of every teacher. The Act declares that Section 10, rights of all school personnel, Section 11, special rights and or privileges of teaching or academic staff, and Section 16, which is a teacher's obligations. So that's all. And let me call on Miss Nicole Nacario for giving us information about the other sources of Philippine educational system. Miss Nicole, the floor is yours.
Good day, I am Miss Nicole Nacario, the second speaker of today's discussion. Now, I am going to discuss about the legal issues in the Philippine education. The first one is the Pecaris Garcia versus the Faculty Admission Committee. Loyola School of Theology admitted Pecaris Garcia for studies leading to an MA in Theology during the summer of 1975 but was refused enrollment during the first semester of 1975 to 76. The issue here is to whether the school may be compelled by mandamus to allow the student to continue studying therein. The result of this case is that the petition was dismissed for lack of merit. Petitioner cannot compel the mandamus to admit her into further studies since the respondent had no clear duty to admit the petitioner. That respondent Father Lambino and Loyola School of Technology has the discretion whether to admit the petitioner or not. Factors that were considered are academic standards, personality traits, character orientation, and nature of Loyola School of Theology as a seminary according to Studio Co. 2014. The second case is AMA Computer College, Paranaque versus Austria. The issue here is to whether or not Austria as college dean is considered a regular employee. As a result, AMA argued that as college dean, Austria was an academic personnel of AMA under Section 4M-4C of the Manual of Regulations for Private School, and as such, his probationary employment is governed by Section 92 thereof and not by the Labor Code or AMS Handbook. That under the circumstances, he has not yet attained the status of a regular employee, that his employment was for a fixed term, but the same was terminated earlier due to just causes according to Maricor 2007. Regulatory laws of the Philippine education. The first one is the Republic Act No. 7836 or the Philippine Teachers Professionalization Act of 1994. For aspiring teachers, the Republic Act No. 7836 strengthens the supervision and regulation of the practice of teaching in the Philippines. All teachers are required to take and pass licensure examination for teachers or LET. The second one is the Republic Act No. 9293, an act amending certain sections of Republic Act No. 7836. Section 26 of the same Act is hereby amended to read as follows. No person shall engage in teaching and/or act as a professional teacher as defined in this Act, whether in the preschool, elementary, or secondary level, unless the person is a duly registered professional teacher and a holder of a valid certificate of registration and a valid professional license, or a holder of a valid special or temporary permit. The third one is Republic Act No. 4670, also known as the Magna Carta for Public School Teachers. This aimed to promote and improve the social and economic status of public school teachers, their living and working conditions, their terms of employment and career prospects, in order that they may compare favorably with existing opportunities in other walks of life, attract and retain in the teaching profession more people with the proper qualifications. It being recognized that advance in education depends on the qualifications and ability of the teaching staff, and that education is an essential factor in the economic growth of the nation as a productive investment of vital importance. The Code of Ethics for Teachers. Since the teacher's work is not confined merely to the development of certain fundamental skills and abilities encompassed by the teaching of the 3 R's, but also includes the development of desirable habits and attitudes that go into the formation of character, his manner of living should provide a worthy example for his pupils and students to emulate, for his fellow teachers to be proud of, and for the community to feel as being enriched by it. The Article 4 of Section 1 stated that professional teachers should introduce themselves with pride as professional teachers, not as just professional teachers. Section 2, making the best preparation for the teaching career, and Section 3, continuing professional education. The 5th and 6th talk about self-respect, which is the essence of Section 4 and 5 of Article 4, the teacher and the profession. Ordinance Number SB 2340, or Institutionalizing the Alternative Learning System, or ALS, in all barangays within Quezon City, providing guidelines therefore and for other purposes. Since every Filipino has a right to free basic education, the government establishes ALS to provide all Filipinos the chance to have access to and complete basic education in a mode that fits their distinct situations and needs according to DepEd.
So hi everyone, I am Brelly Antipuesto, and I am the third speaker of today's video. Now let's proceed. What is a resolution? So a resolution generally states a position or policy of a city. A simple resolution deals with matters entirely within the prerogative of one House Congress, such as adopting or receiving its own rules. A simple resolution is not considered by the other chamber and is not sent to the President for his signature. Like a concurrent resolution, it has no effect and a force of a law. For example, the Chamber adopted House Resolution number 2267, which aims to protect the students' health and well-being in light of the abrupt changes in education services delivery that had to be taken during the coronavirus disease or the COVID-19 pandemic. So the resolution said that the serious threat posed by the pandemic, the troubling consequences of the quarantine measures, and other series of calamities during year 2020 to 2021 have resulted in challenges that have affected or compromised the health and well-being of both teachers and students. Let's proceed to the legal underpinnings of Philippine education. First is we will talk about educational structures. So the high school system, supported by provincial governments, special educational institutions, School of Arts and Trades, and agricultural school, commerce and marine institutes were established in 1902 by the Philippine Commission. In 1908, the Philippine legislature approved Article number 1870, which created the University of the Philippines. Next, the Reorganization Act of 1916 provided the Filipination of all department secretaries except the Secretary of Public Instruction. Then, the Japanese educational policies were embodied in Military Order No. 2 in 1942. The Philippine Executive Commission established the Commission of Education, Health, and Public Welfare, and schools were reopened in June 1942. So on October 14, 1943, the Japanese-sponsored republic to create the Ministry of Education. So under the Japanese regime, the teaching of Tagalog, Philippine history, and character education was reserved for Filipinos. In short, it is love for work and dignity of labor was emphasized. On February 27, 1945, the Department of Instruction was made part of the Department of Public Instruction. In August 2001, Republic Act 9155, otherwise called the Governance of Basic Education Act, was passed, transforming the name of the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports, or DEX, to the Department of Education, or DepEd, and redefining the role of field offices like regional offices, division offices, district offices, and schools. So in 1947, by virtue of Executive Order No. 94, the Department of Instruction was changed to Department of Education, which means during this period, the regulation and supervision of public and private schools belong to the Bureau of Public and Private Schools. In 1972, it became the Department of Education and Culture by virtue of proclamation on 1081 and Ministry of Education and Culture in 1978, virtue of PD number 1397, which means 13 regional offices were created and major organizational changes were implemented in the educational system. Last, the Education Act of 1982 created the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports, which later became the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports in 1987 by the virtue of Executive Order No. 117. The structure of DEX as embodied in EO No. 117 has practically remained unchanged until 1994 when the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, and 1995 when the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, were established to supervise tertiary degree programs and non-degree technical vocational programs respectively. Now let's proceed to the educational policies. First is the Every Child Reader Program, or ECARP. So what is the Every Child a Reader Program? So it is a national program that supports the trust of the Department of Education, or DepEd, to make every child a reader and writer at his or her grade level. It is supporting the attainment of education for all, or EFA, to target the universal school participation and elimination of dropouts, and also repetition in the first 3 grades. So ECARP is implemented through the following. First, design, implementation, and monitoring, evaluation of early reading intervention, and development, administration of reading assessments and treatment, and also reporting of data. Second, Brigada Eskwela, or what is the Brigada Eskwela program all about? It is one of the most important programs in DepEd. In the spirit of bayanihan, private institutions or individuals, government agencies, local government units, and other organizations contribute to DepEd campaign to ensure accessible and quality basic education. Third is Adopt a School Program, or ASB. So it is implemented based on the principles of voluntarism and multiple partnerships. The Adopt a School program of the Department of Education gives the private sector an opportunity to become dynamic and strong partners towards novel goal of educating all Filipinos. So under the Adopt a School program, the adapting private entity which or who engages in providing assistance and services to the public schools shall be entitled to tax incentives up to 150% arising from the total amount incurred in the donation made within the taxable year. Last is Alternative Learning System, or ALS. It is the 1987 Philippine Constitution provides for the recognition and promotion of other forms of education other than formal education. Article 14, Section 2, Paragraph 1 declares that the state shall establish or maintain and support a complete, adequate, and integrated system of education relevant to the needs of the students. Also, in paragraph 4 concisely states to encourages non-formal and informal and indigenous learning systems as well as self-learning, independent and out-of-school study programs, particularly those that respond to community needs. Now let's proceed to the curriculum and instruction. So what is curriculum and instruction? Curriculum and instruction ensures that the organization focuses on the delivery of a relevant, responsive, and effective basic education curriculum around which all other strands and offices provide support. So the new elementary school curriculum, or the NESC, it is the first curriculum to have been tried out gradually by year during a 6-year period before its implementation. This national tryout aimed to determine the viability of the new curriculum. One unique feature of NESC is being research-oriented and research-based according to the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports in 1982. Let's get to know the strengths and weaknesses. First, the strengths. The NESC curriculum is a great help to the Filipino children, especially in molding them as a human person, as a good citizens and productive agents for economic, social, and cultural development. The curriculum provides every Filipino child the basic preparation to become an enlightened, disciplined, nationalistic, self-reliant, God-loving, creative, versatile, and productive. For the weakness, the NESC offers too many subjects, in which will result knowing more of the subjects and less of the content. With this number of subjects, the students will get bored and cannot concentrate and even neglect their assignments.
Thank you for the very informative talk. And that's it. You've heard a very informative information about historical legal foundations in education. So I hope that you've learned something from the talk. And once again, to our speakers, thank you for giving us your precious time to participate today. That's all, and God bless.